I've been trying to explain to Americans like who have maybe no relationship to this cause. They're certainly aware of it now, but I have a little bit of a different perspective, and certainly you do as a Palestinian American. My mom is from Lebanon, and this like completely has shaped the way I see this conflict in the world. But these people who don't have a dog in the fight in that particular kind of way, and I try to explain to them, it's like Gaza has come here. The way in which this government is policing around these issues, they are doing the bidding of, if not the direct Israeli government, but certainly Israeli interests as they see them, or again, donor class interests. They are affecting civil liberties here because of a conflict there. Whether or not you find Khalil a sympathetic figure, that fact alone should cause alarm bells to go off, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And frankly, the Israeli government itself brags about its influence on passing laws to restrict boycotts and so on. So they're not, again, coy about the fact that they're part of the push. So, even though pro-Israel groups might not technically be related to the Israeli government in any way, but the Israeli government itself is bragging about its role. You have the Prime Minister's official Twitter account using the word "we" when talking about passing the laws that are being pushed in different states to restrict the conversation on what Israel is doing. And precisely to your point, there are two levels to this. From my perspective, any decent human being should care that your government is facilitating the mass slaughter of civilians in a different part of the world. But even if you wanted to set that aside and look at it strictly from domestically, what's in U.S. interest? The fact that, again, we say we don't have money for healthcare for all Americans. We say we don't have all these things that every other advanced country in the world enjoys. All Western democracies in Europe, universal healthcare and childcare and all sorts of benefits that their people get. We say we can't afford that, and yet we're giving tens of billions of dollars to the Israeli government to facilitate this genocidal project and undermining our constitution in the process. Seems like a no-brainer where Americans should stand on this. Stop wasting our money on something that is horrible and monstrous and start protecting our rights here in the United States to be able to say whatever the hell we want to about whatever we want to, and stop carving this exception to one foreign government that we're somehow not allowed to criticize or boycott. Or
it's madness that people would give their civil liberties away for any foreign government, for France, for Canada, for Mexico, for Israel, for any foreign government. These are sacred things that are very, very difficult to protect, and they're just going to punt for a foreign government's interest. It has been. My producer off screen, we talk about this all the time. I have a hard time understanding how there can be rhetoric around the values of freedom and then a willingness to look the other way because they're green card holders, because their last name is not Thomas or Smith or some other kind of factor. I don't know. I'm more expressing to you dismay, but it has been hard to watch. It's been truly hard to watch.
And it's you always start with vulnerable, marginalized groups that nobody cares about. And that's how you begin to lose it for everyone. And that's the part that people miss, is that if being subject to corporate media propaganda 24/7, you come to the conclusion that who cares about these people, students who are protesting, you start believing all the smears against them. Still, there is the principle of freedom of expression that should apply to everyone. And if you give it up for people who you disagree with, it's very easy to say, I'm for free speech for the views that I like. Where it really matters, where you show what your principles are, is when you stand up for the rights of people that you don't agree with and don't like, frankly. Because if you start giving up those rights for them, it's only a matter of time before somebody different is in power, and it becomes your rights that are under threat.
One of the biggest lessons I've had to learn, and this was something we knew, if I can say in my adult life, and maybe before that it's a little bit different, but certainly in my adult life, I watched 9/11 happen in my dorm room as a senior in college. That was a big event. But really, that was a monumental event, but the radicalizing event was watching the invasion of Iraq. That had a profound effect on my politics. And then now this. These have been two deeply, deeply radicalizing events for me in a way that I just cannot see the world the same way as I did before. And one of the things that has been absolutely destroyed in the process is any notion of the value of the rules-based order, the Western order. I wonder if you could speak to this and like your sense as well. I think we're roughly, not too far apart in age. We grew up in a time, post-World War II, kind of. The 90s were, it's kind of funny. We look back on the 90s, they were stable to a degree, were they not? There was something to it. And the rules-based order, I think we all knew that it was flawed and it was certainly limited and it had favorites. But Gaza has laid it bare as utterly fraudulent in my mind. I wonder if you share that opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, look, at least, the conception was this is a flawed international order. There are exceptions. The powerful get away with certain things. But there was the belief that we're building towards something and that it's about tweaking and improving, and over time we're going to get to a better place. In the, I guess, a similar sense of like combating racism within the United States. Obviously, things remain deeply imperfect, but it's certainly better than what it was in the 50s. And the 50s were certainly better than what it was in the 1800s and so on, that there is some level of progress. And I believe that about the international order until this happened, simply because we've decided to essentially throw away any semblance. I mean, consider the fact that the Israeli leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, is wanted by the International Criminal Court. And unlike the United States, which doesn't recognize the court, European countries do recognize that court and think international law is really important. And you know, whenever you talk about international institutions, international law, European countries are usually in the forefront of talking about the importance of that international-based order and rules-based order. And you have now a situation in which Benjamin Netanyahu is being encouraged by European leaders to visit their countries, promising that they're not going to enforce that arrest warrant that's out for him. There is no bigger abandonment of any conception of international law and human rights and everything that we pay lip service to than the fact that you're saying, oh, wait, we were for these rules and for international court arrest warrants when we're talking about random dictators in Africa or the Middle East or whatever. But if it's Israel, then that's an exception. Sorry, now the rules don't apply anymore. The extent to which we are willing to say that rules do not apply to Israel means that those rules are meaningless. It means that nobody has any incentive to follow them or pay any attention to them, because we're witnessing nothing in international law. You know, when you talk about the layers of violations, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Genocide is at the top of it. And you have now Israel, frankly, quite obviously engaged in a genocidal campaign in Gaza. And everybody's insisting that international rules don't apply. Yeah, you can't take it seriously anymore, and I don't think we're heading in the right direction anymore. We are looking, maybe there might be a different iteration of it in the future, of a way of trying to put something different together that's more robust and more meaningful. But in the meantime, I think we are looking at the complete disintegration of any pretense that we're living in a rules-based order in which countries are supposed to behave certain ways and not.
Do you have any specific sense of the geopolitical impact?
I think this is a green light for everyone to behave however they want to, knowing that accountability is practically meaningless, and that the US, the shining city on the hill, the ones who are preaching to the rest of the world about democracy and human rights, that this is entirely, the level of insincerity involved in this kind of rhetoric. And it's funny, maybe that's one of the things that's kind of amusing about Trump, is that he doesn't pay lip service to any of this stuff. For him, it is pretty much...
Might makes right.
Yeah, might is right, and if you pay me enough, I might do what you want me to do. And it's just so transactional. Yeah, it's a dark moment in which we've abandoned this pretense of building towards something meaningful, and I really don't know what the full impact is going to be, but we're certainly heading in a very dark direction, and I worry about sort of where Trump is taking us on top of where Gaza has been taking us since before all of this, and about the fact that American policy before Gaza was being genocided was always an exception on this one issue. The fact that we intervened to kick Iraq out of Kuwait, we've intervened in some ways saying we can't believe that Russia would invade Ukraine, and yet Israel has been occupying Palestinian territories illegally for decades. And the US has been paying lip service to the idea that Israel should end the occupation at some point. But actual policy has been to just indulge that occupation in an endless supply of American weapons and diplomatic protection. The US intervened at the UN more than 50 times to veto resolutions that are critical of Israel. So again, that's, by the way, greater than the number of all vetoes cast by all other permanent members of the UN Security Council combined on all issues from the 1970s to today. And so we're very openly saying that there is this one exception. And I don't know how anybody in the world takes us seriously after this. I don't know how anybody in the world takes our rhetoric seriously about it. And I don't know whether Trump is the signal of the end of something, whether he's a blip that we might be able to survive and build back up from, or whether he's really the disintegration of America's moral standing, that being the obvious part. But really what's left of America's leadership after this, I think, is really in question.